Sam Frost, welcome to the Marketing Business Show.
Thank you for having me on.
Mate, I'm excited to have you on. I've known you probably, I don't know, maybe 15 years.
Yeah, it's going back a while.
It's going back a while. But I was reading a bit about you, and I want to take you back there.
Yeah.
You were a produce artist.
I was, yes.
At New World Fenelton.
Yep, that's right.
How good? What did you learn there, mate?
Really customer service was the main art of what I learned there. I was pretty good at actually the fruit and vegetable sort of decision-making aspect of things and what goes where and what was getting a bit old to sell and all sorts of things. But the main thing was the customer service aspect. You'd get people come in with difficult challenges, problems they would... I remember someone once really bagging me out because it was the complete off-season to get snow peas. So you couldn't get snow peas. It was I can't now remember what the snow pea season was, but they're an imported product. And this lady came in and just went absolutely apoplectic at me in front of everybody because she had a dinner party that night, needed snow peas, couldn't get snow peas. And New World Fenelton being New World Fenelton, there was an element of it being I should be able to get snow peas at any time of the year.
They didn't deliver.
I keep coming back to that as an example of something where it's hey, as 17-year-old me or 18-year-old me, however old I was, dealing with someone who was a bit difficult to deal with, where problems happen. You probably get it in business, I get it in business. You do something wrong, something doesn't go to plan, someone chews you out a little bit. There's an element of just that foundational learning how to deal with difficult scenarios. So I'm grateful for the experience. Yeah.
I think as a youngster, you learn a lot. Working, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just working.
I don't think it matters so much what you do. It's just the having a job and doing something.
And having to deal with people. And having to deal with people, you're just seeing with dealing with people that are not at their best, right? Because they're stressed because, they've got friends coming around and they've talked about the snow pea restaurant
that's it.
recipe for how long.
And then I've had to disappoint them and they can only have rama beans or something rubbish like that.
Oh, man. First world problems. Hey, Sam, we're going to talk about... Look, you're a real expert in B2B digital marketing, and I'm excited to have you on because I've known you for a while, and I've always liked talking to you, and I've always liked how I like dealing with the experts, right? And I think we live in an era now where, I hate to say it, but you only have to have a laptop for some of these people that are starting up digital agencies, and some of the results I see coming through, and it's scary to see where business owners are spending their money. Let's go back a wee bit though. Where did you learn your craft? Because I know from some of the companies that you've worked with, you've worked for some really smart entrepreneurs, digital marketing people. So is that where you cut your teeth? Places like Double Dot Media and stuff like that.
I mean, basically the journey of how I got into doing what I'm doing now started way back when I was at high school. So the produce artist piece all relates into this. So I had that job. That was your standard, I think it was Thursday evenings, Saturday mornings kind of thing. And at the time I played in a band. So I played in a reggae band of all things at high school. The Young Souls, look us up. In fact, don't look us up because you won't find anything. I think we were on Bebo maybe, something like that. But, we had this band, still best friends with some of the guys from the band. And I had a really rubbish guitar. I was the guitar player. I got called in at the last minute to be a guitar player because the other guy fell through for a gig and I wound up in this band and I couldn't afford to buy a better one. Working this produce job. So I literally went online, and don't ever do this because it sends you down a dark rabbit hole. I Googled, how do you make money online?
Nice.
Someone must be able to teach me. And I think I stumbled upon people trying to scam me into multi-level marketing schemes and all sorts of things.
Plenty of those still go.
But I came across this thing, you might have heard of it. There's this guy, was it Travis Sago or Sago was his name? He did this thing called the bum marketing method. And I don't mean bum as in rear end, I mean bum as in I guess a politically incorrect term for homeless person. And the idea behind it was this method was so free and so simple that even a bum, even someone who doesn't have a computer, could go into the library and jump in front of a computer. And the idea was you would write articles and post them to things like, remember e-zine articles? Squidoo and all those kind of sites, that sort of Web 2.0 article directories. And you'd link people off, because they'd rank really well in Google. You'd link them off to ClickBank products or anything that you wanted to sell.
Affiliate marketing.
Affiliate marketing. That's where I started. That's what I started doing. Brilliant. I used to come home from school, and I was lucky that I was always pretty good academically, so I could kind of coast by not doing my homework. And so I'd come home from school, and I had this old iMac that I'd jump on, lock myself in my room.
Brilliant.
And I started out, I think the first thing I ever had any success doing, I probably worked for about 6 months to a year part-time with no results. Just starting to see a few things ranking, getting a bit of traffic, learning a bit. Then I had a bit of a break with the Xbox 360 at the time was the games console. They used to go wrong all the time. They used to brick themselves and you get this red light would show up. and there was a ClickBank product that was how you could fix it yourself, and it was all a bit dodgy in the sense it was like take it to bits, put the old paint stripper on or hot air gun on it, melt some of the solder, and it would start working again. But I wound up creating content around that topic, and then ranking these articles on Easy and Articles and all those kind of sites, and it basically grew off the back of that. That made me quite decent money for a 17-year-old at the time.
Point there though, hot market.
Yeah, hot market. That's it. Yeah, it was a hot market. It was particularly hot market because in America, I think, if I recall correctly, they didn't at the time at least have very good kind of consumer protection around these types of products. Oh, wow. So you'd buy it, and once the warranty, say the manufacturer gave you a 6-month warranty, once that was up, that was up. Here we've got that CGA type thing. So you buy a $500 game console. If it dies after 3 years, even if it's out of warranty, you'd probably expect it to keep working. But these people were a bit desperate because they couldn't necessarily buy a new one. They might have saved up their pocket money or whatever. Couldn't buy a new one, but they could borrow dad's screwdriver, mum's hairdryer.
And what would a product like that cost?
The repair product.
Yeah, the one that you were selling on
ClickBank. $20, something like
so
that.
It's worth it having a go, right?
Yeah, worth it having a go, because if you didn't do it, the thing was bricked, it was useless anyway.
And for people watching, ClickBank and still is a place where you can go sell a digital product and share the commission.
That's right, and these things were paying like 70-75% commission.
Do you remember your first sale?
Yeah, I remember my first sale. I remember coming home from school. I would have been in year 12, so whatever that is form-wise for people who were pre-NCA. And I'd been working away at it for quite some time. And I remember coming home, and I used to come home and check my ClickBank account. And I remember the first days, you'd get people clicking on your link, and you'd see those analytics show. Then you'd come in and you see someone had added the product to the cart. And I remember coming home one day, and it was like a $15 or $20 commission. And I was actually hooked. Like, I was literally hooked from that point. And it's kind of, that was it. That was the real genesis of what I got into. And within probably 3 months, I'd made enough doing this it sort of snowballed a bit. Made enough. And I remember coming into year 13, had the summer break. And I was like, I've actually got the money now to go down. I think it was Canterbury Music Planet I went down to. Still kept the receipt somewhere for posterity. Bought myself a guitar I'd always wanted. Still have it, still play it every day. It's probably the only thing I'd consider to be my prized possession. It's the one thing I would never sell.
Good.
I'd go hungry before I sold that thing. Anything else is up for grabs, but that is like, it's really the genesis of it all for me. And off the back of that, when I finished up high school, I picked up a job working for Double Dot Media, who were, big sort of players at the time in that whole space.
Was Mark there?
Mark was there. Mark was there, and Simon, and they were great guys, and they taught me a lot, and they kind of gave me a bit of an opportunity as really, a young person with some practical experience but no qualifications in that space.
So you went to university as well, though?
Yes, yeah.
So were you studying, or were you still doing your the affiliate marketing?
Yeah, I was still doing that on the side. So I basically studied. I took a year off between high school and university, partly because I was kind of young for my age, or young for my year level. So there's no harm in me. Worked still a bit at the supermarket. Did affiliate marketing stuff, saved up. That allowed me to pay for university without getting a loan, which was cool. Which meant that I could go and study what I was interested in, which was history. Studied history and French, of all things.
Wow.
So graduated in political science.
Good.
Came out and did that. But it was through that university time I sort of transitioned to working maybe 20-odd hours a week for Double Dot Media. And that got me a good grounding and a lot more exposure to kind of different aspects of digital marketing. And off the back of that, then I got some agency roles kind of out of university. It all went from there, really.
When I meet people that that I know who have studied with certain types of marketers, they're just better at stuff. I always ask people, so what are you reading, or who have you studied with? You can basically tell by what their answers are if they're going to have any chops at what they're doing.
And I think the grounding, like affiliate marketing has some bad sides, let's be honest. There's some weird sort of unethical aspects to it, depending on what you're selling, and there were bits I'd never liked about it, but the main thing that I've found that's always kept me in good stead is because it's purely pay on performance, there's that strong element of you have to have some kind of almost like commercial nous and commercial capability, and you sniff out an opportunity, and then you say, right, there's somebody with a problem, like their Xbox is broken, or they've got a dog that won't stop yapping, or they want to bench press more at the gym, or whatever the products were that people were selling at the time. there's people with a problem. How do you find where you can get your message in front of them and then reach them? And at the time, it was that article directory type thing. Obviously, the game has changed hugely since then, and it's become a lot more sophisticated. And, I think things like YouTube were really in their infancy then. So now people, I think, are a lot less accustomed to paying for information, at least the sort of stuff that I would have sold as a ClickBank product back then. But the lessons still, it's like that snow pea incident. I come back to the same things I learned, 15 years ago?
15 years ago. Yeah. And so you started working at agencies. And what were you learning? Like, were you going into the mindset of always going to go and grow my own and then run my own business someday?
No. I mean, I really didn't know what I wanted to do to a certain extent. Like, I studied history because I love history, and like if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd probably go and just read history books all the time. Like, that's what I really love. But there was no kind of pathway to turn it into a living. But I got this sort of initial opportunity with an agency, and that exposed me to more stuff that I hadn't really dealt with. So things like the paid digital side of things. I've really been focused on kind of SEO. That like Web 2.0. I think people call it parasite SEO now, but kind of leveraging other people's websites to rank on. That had been like a big part of what I'd done. Then I got more exposure to the creative side, more exposure to the strategy side, more exposure to the paid side. And it all kind of snowballed off that with a couple of agency roles until I got like a decent in-house job. And then I was like, hey, I'm well enough ensconced in this that I can see this as a career. I can see this as a pathway. But even then, it wasn't until, quite some time later that I'm actually going to give this a try as a business, if that makes sense. I was pretty content for a long time working for other people.
I guess, what were some of the key learnings for you along that period, like when you were working for other businesses?
Yeah, I think for me, the key thing is always coming back to this kind of question of what problem do you solve and for whom? So thinking about that from the customer perspective or the client perspective, if you're working for an agency, if you've got a business selling a certain type of product or service, who's the real target customer? What problems did that customer have? What keeps them up at night? What are those pain points? And it was that kind of repeated process of seeing the businesses that did best. Like, that's one of the great advantages, I think, of working in an agency model is you, at least at the starting point, you get exposure to a lot of different businesses, and oftentimes you would just see a general trend of the businesses that were commercially more successful, almost irrespective of how the agency work was impacting things. It was the businesses that did the best were the ones that had a really good kind of focus on the customer, if that makes sense, a customer pain point. And I can think of businesses that I kind of worked on projects for that must have folded over time or not been so successful. When I go back and look at them, and I see others that have gone on, some that have been sold. There was one in the news recently that was an account I used to work on way back in my first agency job that the business just sold. And I saw it in the news, and I think they always had quite a ruthless obsession with understanding what drove their customer, and you can see 15 years down the track it's paid off for them. So I think that was really good learning. Because
a lot of businesses, they'll come in and they'll focus on the product first, right? So they focus on the designing the product and don't focus on the demand side for the product, right?
That's it. They kind of they build a solution and try and seek a problem to chase it rather than going the other way around, which I think is generally more effective.
Oh, it totally is more effective, and you can see it. Like even though they may have a product, but they focus in on the wrong thing that matters to the consumer. Had Owen here from Concentrate, and he was talking about some rowing software. And the people that created this rowing software were focusing on the rowing software. Where Concentrate came in, did some research and stuff, and started looking at things from a messaging point of view. And the reason people were actually buying it was for motivation.
So it's a very different application to what you set out to achieve.
One was focused on the product, the other one was focused on the customer. And what the customer wanted.
And I think there can often be some of that, like if I think through, say, oftentimes startup businesses can have this problem where if you're so knowledgeable and have so much expertise in one domain or one area, your kind of knowledge sits well above what your potential customers might have. You're kind of like your level of thinking is different, but you assume that everybody thinks at your level, if that makes sense. So you're thinking about rowing being the issue, but actually, like you say, it's motivation that's the problem for a wider pool of people, and fewer people. Maybe there's not enough people who are thinking about rowing as a problem to actually justify the market for that product.
But a small twist to that.
Yeah, exactly.
You take it from just focusing on the supply, what you're doing, to demand.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and demand is where the money is made.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Like, and that takes me back to that Xbox thing. Like that's where the money.
Yeah.
I think I was more of a PlayStation guy, but I knew there was a demand there. Yeah, there was a demand. People had a real pressing demand. They had an expensive piece of electronic equipment that they couldn't use.
Yeah.
They were basically faced with either try this or throw it out. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to try it, right?
Yeah. It reminds me of when back in the day when I was learning copywriting, and Gary Halbert said it best. Where do you go to sell hot dogs? And everyone was saying, oh, this place.
Yeah.
He said, no, where there's a starving crowd. Right?
Yeah.
Just find where there's demand.
Yeah.
And build that demand and worry about the supply. Which I think a lot of business owners do the opposite, right?
Yeah.
They create the supply,
yeah,
and then they wake up and go, shit, no one wants to buy my
stuff. I have a product because the product is interesting to me, or I just think it seems like a good product or a good idea, and now I've got to go find or try and almost retrofit it on a group of people.
Yeah.
Particularly that business to business context, which is where I focus, where so much of it is problem focused, right? If the customer, if your potential customer doesn't have a problem, it may be very difficult, no matter how good your product is, to actually get someone to buy it, because oftentimes there has to be a problem, a pain point that is really the genesis or the origin of a purchase-making decision.
Yeah.
Without that problem, it's like it might be a total nice to have.
Yeah.
Like hey, that sounds cool, but there's no impetus for me to buy it.
Yeah.
And that's something that if I look at the clients I work with and businesses I deal with, the ones who are most successful have that really deep understanding of the problem side, and they almost know and understand that they may not be able to make a sale until that problem rears its head.
Yeah.
But it's how do you make yourself the incumbent solution, the kind of go-to guy, the go-to supplier when that problem occurs. That's key.
And that is key. And I was talking to a lady yesterday, and she's a software pro, and I was like, just taking her through some questions around those problems and what are some of the key ones that you're solving, and are you creating a narrative on those? Because if you're not, you should be, right? You need to be getting your message out there to be talking about those, because that will make you become more relevant to the people that can and want to buy your product. Hey, so Sam, where did you start to learn like the whacking and cracking, like you got into Google Ads, SEO, like Facebook, Meta? Where did you start to learn this sort of stuff? Was it once again training yourself on YouTube, or like, did you do courses? How were you?
A lot of it, one thing I kind of always prided myself on, and I think has set me in good stead, is I would spend my own time and my own money learning how to do things.
Amen.
And that's still something I do today. So I like, if I look at the kind of, I guess, era of my career or pathway where I was getting more into the paid side, for example, Google Ads, Meta Ads, I had initial exposure to it through agency jobs, but then I would do things still like the ClickBank type stuff. I'd go home in the evening or in the weekend and say, hey, I'm going to just set up a landing page and run some traffic to this and spend my own money, and hey, even if I lose money a little bit, I'm learning something.
It's the best way to learn, right?
Learning through doing has kind of always been my thing. Weirdly enough, apart from the more sort of academic university side, I like reading. But in this context, I like learning through doing. And then that got me, opportunities with jobs and so on, where I could deal with bigger accounts and bigger spends and kind of learn faster. So, obviously I'd look up things like YouTube tutorials, or I'd buy an ebook, or I'd go and read a book or something like that. But it was the putting into practice through basically spending my own money and time, and then I could come along to a prospective employer, or in the early days of my business, and say, hey, I've tried that. I actually put my own money into it, my own time, and that kind of gave me a bit of a competitive edge, I think.
Totally. Yeah. I remember when I first started Google Ads, I had a ClickBank product, and I spent $383 US overnight. And I made this many sales.
Big fat zero.
And I was like, whoa, what? They made it sound so easy. Then I bought a book ebook, $97 by a guy called Perry Marshall.
Yeah, that's right. I know the name.
And I learnt, but someone like you, I started learning and then doing, doing, and then all of a sudden you turn that around. And it's a skill that I just found. I found kind of like addictive, because I knew I could add value to people with my knowledge, but my knowledge wasn't theory. It was backed by
having done it, having gone out and done it. And it was like, even I go back to the genesis of it all, which was wanting a better guitar. When I learned guitar, I've never had a lesson. I just got a guitar. I was like, I want to learn to play this. And I think I twisted my parents' arm into buying me one for like my 14th birthday or something like that.
Yeah.
I'd have to check the record or ask mum, so to speak. And then I like just got like the most basic book from the library, and it was just like, hey, I'm going to try and figure things out a bit. Wow. It's the same kind of principle in action. It's like figure things out as you go, learn what works, learn what doesn't. Obviously, over time, I think one thing I've kind of done more is tried to absorb some of that more academic and you know, almost like research and evidence-based, what's best practice, what's not. But at the same time, blending it with the, hey, I actually can go into the tools and know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And that's super useful today, right?
Yeah.
Like as we said before, you know, like the barrier to entry here has now become pretty much non-existent.
Yeah.
And you're definitely coming up against where you're seeing a lot of bad stuff, and I think it comes down to that grounding and we talked about this before starting the podcast, but it was a lot of people have go to the tactics, right? They might have done a course in Facebook or Meta or they've done some work in Google, but they haven't looked at any of the strategies.
No, they just jump into what's accessible. And I think, like, even to your point, like, you know, anyone with a laptop, right, can start a business in this space. And there's a whole kind of industry of people who sell that as almost like a starting point. Like, hey, you know, I keep
people
seeing
are selling the pans.
I keep seeing it like, you know,
marketer.
That's it. You know, build a 6-figure, you know, Facebook ads business with no experience. Buy my course. It's always buy my course first.
We should sell one of those.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we're in the wrong industry, but that sort of, there's that aspect to it. And then if I look at it more in a kind of like general business sense, and you probably see the same thing too, and you alluded to it, right? Businesses will just start doing things. They'll just say, hey, Google Ads seems like a good idea. Let's do Google Ads. Well, why? Is it necessarily a good fit for your business? Or let's do Facebook ads, or let's do LinkedIn ads, or let's build a new website, or, you know, let's rebrand the business, or whatever the case may be. All of those things could be perfectly valid, but why are they being done, and what problem is actually being solved in that process?
Totally.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day when John Campbell was talking about Twitter. This is a long time ago, but he was talking about Twitter and how businesses should use it. And I remember I was getting phone calls, and we'd get a phone call, and people would say, "Oh, I was listening to John Campbell last night, and he said we needed Twitter." And I'm like, dude, you're not even doing it, because this is when we were writing Yellow Pages ads. You're not even doing Yellow Pages properly, right? But it was like, just because someone told them to do it, and it really made me realize that you have to design the strategy to pick the tactics to produce the results and not the other way around.
That's it.
And the strategy first thinking is kind of like it's the hard stuff, really. It's the boring stuff. It's the stuff that takes a lot of calories, tuning you to really understand, what problem do you solve? And who actually do you solve it for? Why do they actually care, and why should they do business with you? There's a whole bunch of things.
Where can you get in front of the customer? Rather than just going, oh, well, Facebook, everyone's on Facebook. But is your customer necessarily on Facebook in a context in which they can be reached properly? And, in a context in which it's going to be effective to reach them, if that makes sense.
What are some of the common mistakes that you have started to see? 15 years in, now running your own, doing a lot of marketing for B2B and consulting-wise. What are some of the common mistakes that you're starting to see?
I mean, if I go through a kind of laundry list of common things, I think probably the biggest one, to the point we've just discussed, is there is no kind of strategic component to what's being done.
No.
And that's often not like a deliberate decision. It's often like a sort of outcome of a process by which the business starts and they get a few initial customers and they're like, hey, well, let's do a bit of ads. And it's often that let's do a bit of this, let's do a bit of that. Maybe they get an agency on board to do some stuff, or a freelancer or an in-house person.
I'll give you a classic example of that the other day. We did a high-performance strategy review, and this customer was selling to builders, right? And the radio rep had come in and sold them this package at Christmas time for builders to get their cars and vans sign written. Now, what do you think a builder is doing in December?
Probably taking it easy,
no, the builder in December is on the tools trying to get everything finished so he can grab his jet ski, grab his boats, grab his family, spend time. He's been working all year, and his customers are going, I need this finished, I need this finished. He's got no intention of going and having a chat to the signage company. So not saying that campaign wouldn't work, but it's never going to work in December. You know, maybe February, March, April, you run that campaign, you've got a chance with the right message, the right offer. But and I don't blame the business owner for that, because the business owner was just, hey, and got sold it, right? But really, when you and when I took him back through it, you know, and sadly we didn't speak to him beforehand, but now speaking to him afterwards, he really gets it now. He goes, oh man, that was never going to work, was it? And right? So
there's always that sort of stuff to watch out for. So I think that strategy piece, that's one mistake. If I look at other mistakes that I see at a fairly kind of common level, I would say another one, with specific respect to what businesses are doing digitally, is getting really suckered into like projects that feel like they're returning something, but aren't necessarily a good thing to be doing.
That's
so I think like building a new website for a business is a really classic example of this. Now, if you have, I think just about every business needs a website, right? But a lot of businesses, I particularly find in the B2B space, because it's something that like various elements within the business can stamp their mark on. So if I go and engage as a business owner, I engage an agency to build me a new website, for example. They can build me a fantastic website, and you've got something as an output out of the end. And so you can go along to your investors and say, look, we've had this website done. You can go along to the staff and say, we've rolled out this new website. It's very easy to point to that and see some kind of progress, even if it's kind of misplaced progress.
Totally.
Same goes with rebrandings for the sake of rebrandings, or doing a new logo for the sake of doing a new logo, or whatever it is. Because there's a controllable, tangible output, like if we pay a graphic designer to do us a new logo, we're going to get a new logo. Whereas if we go and do some strategy work, for example, we get something that probably feels more wishy-washy in terms of the actual tangible output. That's not necessarily the case when you look at the value it can unlock, but that's something I see quite often. It's like businesses have really neglected trying to get in front of the customer to doing things that's like, hey, we had a pretty good website that was okay, and we actually had no real complaints about it. But let's go spend our marketing budget on getting a new site anyway, because then we can talk about our new website. And I don't know whether some of that comes off. I think particularly a lot of businesses are almost scared of selling, actually. They're kind of, they want to do stuff that feels like progress is being made, but it's not necessarily actually adding any value. That's not to say there's no utility in having a good site. And I think a lot of website builders, design agencies and so on do a fantastic job. But it's, why are you having that project done from the business perspective? What problem is that actually solving for you? Is there a problem that's being solved?
And a lot of the times, I love what you said about misplaced progress, right? Because what can happen, or what I always say to people, let's just park what we've got. Let's measure it. Because one thing you're not doing right now is measuring it. So let's just get some things that we would normally track, and we'll get that set up first. And then in 3 months' time, when we've driven some traffic at it, and we actually know, let's then make some business decisions based off that. Well, I heard a classic one the other day of the agency in town is selling landing pages and charging some decent money for these landing pages, and driving ads to it, and telling the business owner that messenger marketing doesn't work. And when I thought about it, I was thinking, well, they don't want messenger marketing to work, because they need to sell the landing page.
That's it.
And then, luckily enough, I'm on the I'm well connected. So this agency actually had another company. Well, this business owner actually had another company doing messenger marketing. So I could see the results. The landing page stuff was so bad. Like the cost that was costing this business owner, to the point he nearly lost his business. Luckily, someone else was doing messenger marketing on the other side and was generating real leads. So you've got to kind of weigh it up too. What if someone's trying to sell you? They're just they're doing this because they want to sell you.
That's it.
So, but once again, I've got a new landing page. That misplaced progress, I think, is a real key. How do you, as a business owner, then get around that? Like, what do you do? Because if people are coming to you and suggesting this, how do you know it's the real deal?
I mean, it's a hard problem to solve. It's kind of a hard question to answer. I think a lot of it comes down to, once again, like, if a business has a really robust understanding of the problem it solves, for whom they solve the problem, where they can reach the customer, what motivates the customer, then everything can kind of spin off the back of that, if that makes sense. And then you can almost like assess your decision making in view of, is it helping me against those key points? So, if you this is probably an extreme example, but, I have, like very niche B2B clients who come along and say things like, oh, we need to be on TikTok, or we should be on Pinterest, or something like that. Now, there might be some businesses for whom that's a fantastic fit. I don't want to knock it, but I sit there and look at what they're doing, who they're trying to sell to, and go, well, that doesn't really achieve anything in terms of getting you closer to your target customer. Who maybe if we looked at social media platforms, LinkedIn's the only one where there's kind of close enough and robust enough targeting to move things forward for you. So maybe, in an ideal world, you could have a TikTok profile and feel like you're getting some kind of value out of it by getting a whole lot of views, but is that going to get you any actual commercial value for your business? If you can do that by assessing it against your customer and where you're going to get in front of them and kind of the strategic piece, I think you're much less likely to make these kinds of mistakes. Otherwise there's this whole element of, because there are so many tactics that you can jump in and out of, particularly with respect to digital marketing. It's, we can make a website, we can set up a Facebook page, we can have a Twitter profile, an X profile, or do Pinterest or whatever. All of it's like pretty much accessible from a smartphone. You can do it. You can set up a TikTok account while you're waiting for the plane to take off, pretending to watch the safety video or whatever it is. Like, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. And I think that's where having that kind of really disciplined, that would be one piece of advice I'd give to any business owner, is have the discipline to go back and almost like assess what you're thinking about doing against whether or not it really makes sense in the context of who you're trying to sell to. If it does, maybe it's a good opportunity. But if not, is it really the best place to spend your effort?
Really understand who are your customers and how you help them, and where they're hanging out. A lot of times, I think an interesting point. A lot of business owners don't want to. They're afraid of that kind of selling piece, and maybe finding out the maybe the real truths around some of their products and stuff like that. And so I think that's where a good partner can come in from an agency's perspective or a consultant's perspective, and maybe have some of those tough questions. And I think, yes, you probably would have learnt this over the years. It's okay to sit in a bit of silence.
That's it. The questions don't always have to lead to a comfortable or easy answer. And that's probably been one thing that if I look at when I started versus now, I've got more comfortable with doing things that maybe make me uncomfortable or make a client uncomfortable or whatever the case may be. And as someone who's probably more on the people-pleasing end of the spectrum, and I don't like conflict a huge amount or anything like that, that was hard to do. But it's been a valuable thing to learn how to do, because it helps you get better results for your customer. And just having that ability to say why, sort of stop and just say, why are we actually doing this? Yes, a new website might look really nice and shiny, and it gives us something to talk about for a little bit of time. But does it really move the needle in terms of the problem we've got? Maybe the problem you've got is an insufficient awareness of your kind of brand and value proposition in the market. How does just having a new website solve that? Now, if you've got evidence and kind of data to suggest that you've got tons of people coming to your site, but because your website is so rubbish, nobody's inquiring, then that would be like a circumstance in which you say, hey, we can justify the expenditure and the effort. But if it's just, hey, we're kind of almost a bit nervous or apprehensive at putting our name out there, but we'll just build up something nice that we can look at and go, hey, we've got a really pretty website. Is that going to actually get you more results? I don't think so.
No. And also, an interesting one, because we do a lot of businesses, probably like yourself, and you start to see some patterns, right? And I notice, more and more, it's obviously mobile technology, right? Everyone's on their mobile, so your analytics now is just mobile. But web companies are still building for desktop. And I saw a beautiful one the other day, a nice looking website, but it wasn't performing on a mobile. It was asking a lot of questions of people. So do you have your logo? Do you have your brand guidelines? All this sort of stuff that you just don't have on a mobile phone. So why are you asking me these questions? So I think part of that is you've got to think about where your customer is on a daily. Are they where are they finding out about you? Are they looking at you only on mobile? So how are you showing up in that area? And the questions or the information that you're wanting from them does not make sense if you're on a mobile phone. And I think that's some of the things we've started to really lean into and notice, and how you can actually move the needle for some of these businesses, because you can increase their leads and chances of conversations just by doing that one thing. Get rid of all that stuff. Send the same traffic there. Guarantee you'll get more conversations, because I don't have to stop and go, shit, where's my logo? Where's my brand guidelines? I don't have that on my mobile phone. I want to click and call. You streamline the process down to what sort of makes sense. And I think as as marketing and digital marketing consultants and agencies, that's our role, right?
Yeah.
Our role is to go, how does a company, how do they use it to make money?
Yeah.
How do they use it to get more inquiry? Because I think, we're not bagging web companies here, but the designers are looking at design.
Yeah. Well, they're doing what they're tasked with doing, which makes perfect sense. It's like, you might have a pilot who doesn't necessarily have the best, manner in broadcasting the flight progress to the passengers. Does it really matter? That's not their job.
No.
That's the job of the cabin crew is to look after the passengers. The job of the pilot is to make sure the plane goes where it needs to go safely, gets up and gets down. And so I don't blame somebody for doing the work they're kind of ascribed or set up to do. And at the end of the day, the kind of liability or responsibility actually vests still with the business owner or the management to say, hey, why are we engaging in this new logo? We've got a logo that looks pretty good. We've got a colour scheme that looks good. Is it really going to move the needle for us? Now, there might be circumstances in which it does. That's totally fine. And pursue it then. But it's understanding that kind of side of things rather than just diving into, we want some sort of shiny object we can pin our name to and say, we achieved this. Yeah. I think that gets businesses into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, misplaced progress.
Yeah.
Love it. I saw a beautiful one the other day, by the way. One of my team picked it up. We're doing a high performance review, and the website actually had on their mobile phone, on their phone number, instead of a 0, it was actually an O.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like the letter O.
Letter O. Yeah. I don't know how you could get that wrong.
Yeah, slip past. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've seen things pan out in the past. I remember a project I worked on once where, client had it was a really good looking website built, and this was a perfect example of like a business that the product was kind of born out a little bit of the sort of it was a brainchild of a guy who had developed something that made sense for his kind of perception of how businesses engaged in certain activity, and there was value to the customer, right? But it wasn't necessarily articulated that well. But there was this whole process that gone through of we just have a new website and we just change the logo and we just change some of the messaging, it will work totally fine. And they had this really flash website built that was, for the time, probably one of the nicest things I've ever seen. This amazing infinite scroll. That was when that was still a bit of a novelty and all sorts of things. And he had it up and running for ages. And he came along and said, well, no one's inquiring. We're driving traffic. What's happening? Is it really that bad? And it was something in this case as simple as no one had ever connected up the contact form to go anywhere, and no one had ever picked up on that. And because people might have been filling out the form, but it wasn't set to send anywhere, all those inquiries were lost. So you've got this whole kind of cascading flow of things, everything from the strategy down to actually some of that really core tactical stuff, like have you checked your website works? That's also important as well. So you can't really afford to neglect any of it.
And I would say if you're watching or listening to this, one thing you can go do is go shop yourself. Yeah. I was just showing a guy the other day, hey, look at this contact form. And his contact form was broken, and his contact form, you couldn't actually put any information in. Yeah. And this happens a lot, software gets updated, all this sort of stuff. I always remember dealing with John, elderly gentleman, he owned 2 florist businesses. Yeah. And we would physically sit down with his credit card and buy flowers. Yeah. Because he wanted to know
what the process was like for the customer. Yeah.
And he was always trying to improve that. Yeah. And I think a lot of businesses don't shop themselves. So go to your contact form, fill it in, see what you get back. Look at it from a different lens.
Oh yeah, I mean, even if I look at my own, if I'm being critical, say of my own presence online, I sort of did a bit of this process recently. I had a bit of spare time and I went through and looked at my own website. I thought, actually, I really focus more on that business to business aspect. But some of the testimonials I've got sitting at the top of where I've got my testimonials, that's from when I was starting my business. And I was just taking any job that would come through the door because there's often an element of that, you've got to pay the bills. And they're businesses that have no kind of relevance or bearing model-wise to the types of customers I work with now. So that's a process for me to go through and update that. But it's just, it's easy actually to overlook the stuff because oftentimes, particularly smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, the owners, the management, they've got so much different stuff going on that realistically they can't dedicate a full-time amount of effort to looking at this kind of stuff. But even just setting yourself a reminder to periodically go check in, is the site working the way I'd expect it to work? Particularly if you're doing things like e-commerce, because stuff does break. It can break and you might not notice. And the truth is, your prospective customer, because they can probably buy something similarly from elsewhere, they're probably not going to stick around and tell you.
No.
That's the key problem. They're not going to stick around and tell you. Yeah.
No, so you definitely have to shop yourself and be prepared to have other people shop you as well, and I guess that's the beautiful thing about some of the things we do with the high performance review is going through and shopping.
Yeah.
And I think you learn a lot. Everyone learns a lot. And sometimes it's a bit harsh, but you have to kind of go through that. Let's talk about a couple of things that we both agree on, and it's kind of our love-hate relationship with some of these consultants that are out there that say they work for Meta and Google and stuff like. And I know you've written some pretty good posts on LinkedIn about this, and I think it's worth sharing some insights into this world with business owners, because they get rung up every day.
All the time, constantly. Yeah, you probably get your phone blown up if your phone numbers on the account somehow, whatever.
We used to have a thing back when I had my SEO business, is on a Friday how long we could keep people on hold. Because they would just come and waste your time. But these they say they work for Google. But they're working on behalf.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I mean, basically all of the ad platforms, Google. I'll use Google as the main example because that's probably the one I deal with the most realistically. LinkedIn does the same, though. Meta does the same. They have people who are, they call themselves account specialists or account reps, or there's a whole load of different names and terminology used, and it seems to change depending platform, and sometimes even within platform it changes over time. But basically these people are sort of boiler room call center worker sales agents for Google or for LinkedIn or for Meta or for any of these platforms. Now there are exceptions. I think back to when I worked for the Warehouse Group, for example, I worked for part of the Warehouse Group. We had a guy who was based out of Sydney. Mitch, I think his name was. He was from Google. He was fantastic, but we spent a lot. It's a big business. We spent a lot of money across the group. This guy, he solved some really tricky problems. And we're doing sports supplements. We kept bumping up into Google thinking we were selling like prescription medicine and illegal drugs and all that sort of stuff. And he was able to solve a problem. But we spent enough across this big, massive retail group that Google could justify giving us that level of support. And I actually looked him up. I think he still works for Google. He was fantastic. But the average small, medium business owner spending $1,000 a month on Google, $5,000 a month, whatever, you don't get that. You get the sort of account specialists, and they are basically, think of them as commission sales agents for Google. Their job is to get you signing up to new features. It's to get you spending more money. The problem is, I think, because a lot of business owners don't set Google, I think particularly because Google has this kind of like established, almost like brand image, the whole "don't be evil" thing back in the day, right? They seem to have dropped, for various reasons. And then people look at them as this kind of, I guess, fountain of knowledge, right? And so it's like, hey, why would the Google guy be trying to put me wrong? Well, they're trying to put you wrong because their job is to sell you things. And their job is not to be your friend. And it's, I think, as long as you think about it in the context of these people are trying to sell me something, maybe there might be some value. I very rarely find there is any value in those calls. But you could take the call, whatever. But the whole thing you need to go into with it is the mindset that this person who's emailed me 20 times and called me every afternoon, they are here to sell me more of Google's advertising or Meta's advertising or LinkedIn's advertising. That's the biggest difference versus, say, working with an agency or a freelancer or a consultant or whatever, where the value kind of exchange is different. You're paying for some time usually for somebody to go and look at what's going on, and there's more of a kind of impetus on their end to tell you the right thing rather than tell you what's going to result in you spending money on ads. Like I kind of, to some extent, don't really care how much my client spends on Google Ads. I care that they spend the right amount to get the results they need.
And I think that is the difference. And I remember being on a call with one of these Google, because we have the same. We have some people in Sydney that we work with, and they're fantastic. But then you have the other side of it. And to some degree, I love going on a call with the business owner. Because I need the business owner to understand that we know what we're doing. But the business owner gets caught up all the time. So we'll go on this call. Let's go together. And it's I always ask, okay, if we do this is great, but can you just give me some proof that this works? What case studies have you got for X, Y, Z? Like, so this is my client. You must have thousands of businesses like this. So can you give me some proof?
And they generally can't.
They can't. And when someone can't, you know that it's just it's smoke and mirrors, right? But I have to sit in that environment with my client to make sure that the client understands, hey, they're in safe hands here.
And that's to your point there about sitting in on it from like an agency perspective or a freelancer perspective or whatever. That's one thing that Google, particularly I found, has pushed really heavily is actually coming along to clients, the advertiser, and saying, hey, go past the agency you work with or the consultant or whatever, and make these changes. And the ultimate aim of what they want to do is push the spend that would be going to an agency or freelancer out of the equation, because that's probably, let's just assume that the average account, the management fee is 10% of the account spend. If you're Google and you could elevate, your account spend by 10% overnight, great return. And I don't blame them for doing that, but it's also incumbent on a business owner to be able to sit there and understand what's being pitched to them, if that makes sense. I think that's where it's so different. Like before we started recording, I gave you the example, I bought a car last year, right? And I went down to the car dealership, and the guy comes up and meets me. I'm looking at the car, I was interested in, out in the yard. And he starts talking to me and running me through the features and everything. And I know he's there to sell me a car, because everybody knows that the car salesperson is there to sell you a car. It doesn't mean they can't give you good advice.
No.
It doesn't mean they can't help you find the product you want, the car you want. But everybody's got that understanding of how the relationship works. But what I find with business owners is they don't tend to look at it this way with Google or with Meta or with LinkedIn. They go, somebody's here to give me free advice. They're like a consultant who's working for free in my corner. And it's just not the case. No. It's just not the case. That's not how it works. So I think that's one thing to be really, really wary of.
Go in with your eyes open and look, ask questions, ask for a bit more proof.
And I would also say, don't make any changes on a call. I've had a couple of conversations where I've had business owners approach me who they've been basically tricked, coerced, whatever you want to say, into making changes on the call itself. And because I think my understanding is that's one of the kind of success criteria of the reps who are doing the process, is can you pitch the changes? It's like step one is get someone on a meeting. Step two is to get them to make those changes. Whether that's, rolling everything on Google over to a broad targeting, or whether it's, running really broad targeting on Meta, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is that they want to sell you on the changes they've got to pitch. And at the very least, even if you want to listen to them, don't make a change there and then. Like, sit on it and think, what's this actually going to do?
It's very confusing for business owners, though. And I've been doing this a long time and had two businesses in this digital space, and I would say, the poor business owner, it's very confusing to them. So you can't blame them.
No, I think it's not a case of blaming them. It's just a case of knowing this is the type of relationship that they're trying to engage in. They're effectively salespeople trying to sell me a product, sell me more advertising.
And I would say they're leveraging a name.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, for sure.
And they don't actually... They're contracted.
Yeah, they're all like call center, boiler room type things.
So that is... So just be very wary of when you get those calls, and go in with your eyes open and be prepared to... I guess if you're prepared to listen to someone like that, maybe go in and educate yourself by going and doing some other stuff too. Maybe give Sam a call and ask him some questions, or go to Facebook or Google, YouTube, and actually do your own research first, right?
That's it. And oftentimes free advice ultimately has a cost.
Totally.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, to use that very cliched saying. And I would say, and this is me trying to speak as impartially as possible, it's not even really a pitch for what I do, it's a pitch for your services, a pitch for anyone who does good work in this space, is the average business owner would be better off to pay some money up front, or pay on the conclusion of some work for an agency or a freelancer or a consultant or a contractor or whatever to review their Google ads or review their Meta ads, review their LinkedIn ads, than just running with these kind of freebie recommendations.
Well, you're paying for their past experience.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's the end of the day. Like as I said at the start, you spent $383 US. Made no sales. You spent a ton of money of your own money, made no sales. You learnt over time, because you needed a new guitar and wanted a new guitar, how to do it, right? So we're not in there for just grabbing a quick commission. We've actually got the t-shirt,
we've done it,
put our own money on the line, and done it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because that is AI, right? So because AI is going to replace those guys, and you're already starting to see it being rolled out, where certain settings are set up a certain way. Where do you see AI's role in the digital marketing space coming in the next few years?
I think with AI, if I look at it from kind of like an opportunity perspective more than anything else, I think what it's going to allow is an increasing amount of kind of the grunt work and the leg work and rote type work to be eliminated. And even if I look at things like, ChatGPT, you can feed it in performance charts or data, and it can do some pretty good analysis. But there are certain things it can't do well, and I'm not convinced it will ever do that well. So I don't know if ChatGPT or AI will ever get to the point where it can understand a customer's pain point as well as somebody who's worked in that industry for a long time can. Yeah. And things like creative, for example. Doesn't matter how good the AI is, it can make really attractive looking stuff. But it doesn't necessarily hit the mark, at least at the moment. This may all change. Maybe we'll have this conversation in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, where we're sitting around with nothing to do because it's like an AI utopia. I don't know, but I think like the big changes I'm seeing coming through with AI is that it is sort of eliminating some of that really basic level stuff. And I think that's having all sorts of impacts on things. Like if I look at, say, it used to be pretty common that businesses would go and engage like a content creation agency or a article writer or something to write blog posts and write newsletters. Whereas now if I look at some of my clients, they're saying, hey, we have the domain knowledge. If I look at my clients on average, that they're usually not great at writing, but what they do have is fantastic knowledge of anything from scaffolding to software to medical devices to whatever it is. They can talk endlessly on that subject. They know all the problems, they know the solutions, and they can come along and say, hey, here's a problem we're seeing in the industry. Here are 3, 4, 5 key points as it relates to that. Here's how our solution ties in. They can go into ChatGPT or whatever AI tool they use, and they can spit out some content around that. But the AI can't replace that first part. If you just go in and say, write me an article about medical device technology, it will be something that the prospective customer often can see, hey, this is hollow, if that makes sense.
Well, what you're sort of talking about there is the AI is very good at the content, but maybe not so much the context.
The understanding piece.
And the context, and this is now. And let's say in 2 years' time, they might have more of the context because you've fed it that, right, and it's learned a whole bunch of stuff from maybe watching nearly 100 podcasts, right, of you. But it's those insights, I think, in the strategic thinking that you feed it is where you get the wins.
Yeah, and even like, why am I using AI for this particular purpose? Like, if I look at something where I've found AI technology to be quite useful in streamlining a workflow, one thing I'll do often with like a client comes along and says, can you review Google Ads for me? So we're spending money, don't know what's working, don't know what is working, don't know what parts we should kind of get rid of. One thing I'll always like to look at is within the account, what's being spent on brand versus non-brand advertising. Because as you're probably aware, unless you're wary of how Google's system works, very common to find that you dig into an account that someone set up themselves or had running for a while, and a lot of the conversion activity is often driven off brand search. So they've built a brand and an engagement and awareness of that brand somewhere else, and Google's just clipping the ticket on the way through. But they roll that into ad groups and campaigns that aren't necessarily brand alone. And so one thing I always like to do is kind of like combine all of the brand terms and then measure the performance of that and the cost and the conversions and the conversion value and so on versus the non-branded stuff. Because I can think of accounts like even way back, if I step back to when I worked for a sports supplements company, we took over the Google Ads account there that an agency had managed, and at surface level, it looked like a really profitable Google Ads account, but what we dug into was that about 95% of all the conversion value came from people searching for this brand by brand name. And that brand had really memorable... In fact, the company's not around anymore, so I can mention them. Shotgun Supplements, if you ever remember them, they had these really memorable ads on TV that used to air, and they had, the kind of founders of the company doing like weird stuff like appearing in a swimming pool with a blow-up gorilla and all sorts of strange stuff like that. They're really out there guys, but the branding was super memorable, and people would see those ads, and then they go and look up Shotgun, and then they go and buy the product. But when we took over the account, brought it in-house because I came on as an in-house manager, all of that was combined into these campaigns and ad groups that, at surface level, it's like, hey, the protein powder one is working really, really well. But if you took out the brand aspect, and when you factored in that a lot of these products didn't have great margin on them either, it was basically the rest of it was unprofitable. We would have been better off actually doing more of those TV ads, building that brand more. And so AI, for example, makes that kind of assessment way easier, because I can go into ChatGPT and say, hey, here's an export of this
so
account data.
A practical use, you just load up like a CSV.
Yeah, that's it. And I say these are the phrases that I want to look for.
Yep.
And can you chart out what has been spent versus what has been returned?
Yeah.
And I used to be able to do that in Google Sheets or Excel, but it just took me longer. But the piece to that is the why is it even being done in the first place? And that's because strategically what I'm trying to do is say, to what extent is this client's Google ad activity just Google kind of clipping the ticket on the way through, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And often hiding that, maybe because it's on the client or to try and understand how the system works, but also Google's not going to exactly, want to disclose this if they don't have to, right?
No.
But if that stuff's all rolled in the brand and the non-brand, it makes the campaigns look like they're performing better than they are.
Yeah, and if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't know what you're looking at, right? So So the opportunity there is like big use of money as well, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's totally it. Yeah. And that for me is really like a key driver and part that I really enjoy. If I look across everything I've ever done in digital, the part I kind of like the most, I find the most fulfilling, is to be able to go to a client and say, you've paid me for some time and I've identified this spend that you could cut with kind of no negative impact, or you could allocate it somewhere else, save it for a rainy day, do whatever you want with it, go buy yourself a new car or something. It doesn't really bother me what you want to do with it to an extent, but that's something that I find really, really rewarding.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's like quite a satisfying feeling to know that. I mean, I remember doing a Google Ads review project for somebody last year, and they were paying an agency, I think it was $2,000 a month on a $10,000 ad spend. It's like a 20% kind of scaling management fee. And just being able to go in and actually show this client, this agency hadn't logged in, in 3 months and made any changes. So you could just turn off that relationship today and you're not missing on anything. No. That's $2,000 a month. Go, take the staff out for a big party every month and keep them really happy or something. It's probably going to have more of an impact,
That's and that happens more than you know. We see this all the time.
Yeah.
So AI then, so you're using it for your own benefit to make yourself more, I guess, efficient.
Yeah, it's like a productivity enhancer. Yeah.
And I really see that. I really see the opportunity for business owners to, we've had a couple of things that we've been doing here over the last year and a half. Is where can you get an hour back in your day?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and
for sure.
Using AI to do that.
Yeah.
Where else do you see AI opportunities for business owners in that digital marketing space? I was using one the other day that looked at a website and gave you the value proposition of the website. So it's basically stripped the website down
to its core elements.
Core elements. It was really interesting just to see, firstly, going into my own mind and going, hey, they could do this, and this better. Yeah. But then getting the AI to go in and give some insights too. I think those sort of tools, if you use them, are so valuable to helping your customers win. We always look at it, okay, where can we help our customers win? Yeah. Where's that gap?
Yeah. I mean, if I look at things that I'm sort of seeing clients implement and other businesses that's using AI effectively, I think a big one is that ability to expand on existing knowledge. That, if you've got, say, team members who are really knowledgeable about certain problems or challenges or industry insights, but frankly they don't like writing, or they don't know how to write, or they don't have the time to do it often, but they've got the time to come along and say, here's 3 bullet points, and those are the bullet points that really matter. Like if you think about most, I'm looking here at your big collection of books, you've got most of those books, right? They can probably be boiled down to a series of key points.
Totally.
And what you're almost paying for around that is you've got the key points, but you can't sell a full-priced, book price for
3-page book.
Yeah, that's it, right? And is it Blinkist or one of those things as an example of those sites that exist that sort of summarize, looking here at, secrets of marketing experts exposed. You can go on and get the summary of that boiled down. If you kind of take the opposite approach, it's like, I've got the summary boiled down, I can use AI to expand on that. Yeah. Then I can, edit it and sense check it and fact check it. That is a really great efficiency for a lot of businesses that kind of allows them to do more. Other things I like, stuff like if you're producing video content, there are some great tools that can allow you to do, say, short versions or boiled down key versions. I use one called Opus Clip or Opus AI for my own business. So I, make YouTube videos on a certain topic. Then I'll go along and put it into Opus, and Opus kind of pulls out. I say, I want something 30 to 60 seconds long. Yeah. These are the words to look out for. Yeah. And then it can pull out some clips that I can put as YouTube shorts and those kind of things. That just gives me like another opportunity to expand what I'm doing without necessarily having to go through a massive process to do so.
I reckon that's one of the things that's available to a lot of business owners. That creating content, right, can be laborious, right? But creating a YouTube video and then giving it to some AI that then can cut it up into, say, 7 or 8 different videos. And then giving it to another piece of AI which can create a blog post. Giving it to another piece of AI that can create you some content posts. Like that. That's like we live in a golden age.
But the key thing there is it all has to come back to the bit that AI doesn't do well and may never be able to do well. I'm not enough of a futurist to know this. But it's what is the idea that you're trying to communicate. Totally. If you just go in and say, I have a business that sells socks, make me some articles about socks. They're often not going to be very good. No. But if you know that there is a specific problem or challenge or issue or something you want to discuss, and you feed in the key points, then you say expand on this, and this is the type of tone I'd like to use and so on. Then to your point, you could feed that into some sort of Pictoria AI is one I used. Or I've played around with, you can feed in an article and it will pull in stock clips and make a video around it. Then you can put that up on YouTube, and that might be something that can rank in Google and get you more traffic. But if you're just letting the AI run wild with coming up with the ideas and building the content, that's where it falls down a bit in my view.
I think personally for me it's AI plus HI creates that super intelligence. It's the human intelligence as well that goes with it, And we're at the cusp of it. Who knows where it's going to go.
That's it,
But at the same time, I'd rather be in it, using it, finding out more about it, but also bringing my human intelligence along the way with it. Because I really do believe, as a business owner, you have to have some part of that in your business. If you're asleep at the wheel on AI, you're going to be in trouble. Because look at even little tools that we're using. That can just make us so much more efficient.
Even things like some of those tools that they plug into your Google Meets or your Zoom meetings and summarize the notes and spit them back out. Like that frees up time for recapping a meeting you've had, and then you've got a little bit of extra time in your day that you might be able to do something else more productive. So it's looking across, I think, the broad sweep of where are some things to me with AI now are like total no-brainers, tools like that. Right, like anything that can kind of summarize meetings for you and pull out the key points. I kind of don't see why you shouldn't be using that unless you've got some top secret meeting you're doing where you've got, data of national significance and you're worried about it being taken. But, that's not the space I play in anyway. That sort of stuff is a no-brainer. Then you move more into these areas where it's like, hey, if I can combine my knowledge, my domain expertise with the AI aspect, what's that going to allow me to do? So even if you look beyond just marketing into things like the medical space, for example, and I've got some clients I've worked with, in various kind of medical capacities, stuff like, hey, to what extent will AI be able to look at medical imaging, for example, and pull out, this is a diagnosis we've got based on this imagery here, but the AI is only 90% confident on it. But instead of the surgeon or the specialist or whatever having to spend half an hour looking at something, maybe they are effectively sense checking it, a bit like planes, right? A lot of the plane technology now is quite automated around the plane trying to fly itself. The pilot is there as much as anything else to take over when things go wrong, or apply that kind of human reasoning and logic that because it's so much more creative ultimately, in a way that maybe computers are never going to be able to be. It gives you additional pathways to solve a problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so true. So true. And that's where that AI and HI comes in.
Yeah, that's it. Right? Yeah, it's the blend. I like that concept. It's the blend. And that would be my one piece of advice for business owners would be, don't get suckered in by just going, let's move everything to AI and strip out the human aspect. Look at it as a means to enhance your knowledge, your kind of capacity.
We have some great... we do presentations, so every 90 days the team does presentations. So the last one I said, I challenge everyone, bring a product, an AI product that's helping you in your role, and showcase that to the team. And everyone has a 10-minute presentation. It's really cool to see some of the things that people are learning together. The AI together. And because there is some crap AI out there too. A lot of them are just softwares with a new domain name.
That's it. Well, a lot of it's just like reskin ChatGPT or something like that. It's just it's pretty basic stuff. And I think there's a lot of a kind of industry of people trying to trade off the hype of it. But it's realistically going to be here to stay, I think, and
totally.
here to expand and grow. But it's that combination of I am an expert as a business owner. I am an expert on X, and I really understand my customer. Coming right back to that strategy discussion,
totally.
And I know the pain points and the problems, and I can feed in solutions and suggestions. But then I don't have to sit there and write blog posts anymore. I can just write the key points because that's the bit that actually matters.
Or I can get them to analyze the data even better and faster.
Yeah.
That's a game changer, right? Like, give it to the computer, understand this data. Based on these recommendations, based on what your findings, what do you recommend next? Right?
Exactly.
That is a good use of, because you can cross check that to your own knowledge.
Yeah, that's it. I've used AI
right?
for that purpose for sure. Like looking at, say, a campaign report or something like that, and going along and saying, these are my takes, these are my findings. Do you agree or disagree? And you kind of have that conversation almost with the AI.
Well, I think that's the real skill to it too, Sam. Is actually make it a companion. Make it your assistant. If you were sitting there asking your assistant, knowledgeable assistant, it'd be like it's kind of like if we were checking an account together. Me and you would go back and forth.
Yeah, we'd bounce ideas off each other. Yeah.
And generally, you'd probably be right more than I would be. So that's why you're here. Sam, I've got one last question because we've nearly been going for just over an hour. And I'm going to put you on the spot because you're a B2B marketing expert, right? What are the top 5 things a B2B company should be doing when they're looking at digital marketing?
Yeah, cool. So one, we've touched on it multiple times, but go back to it again, the strategy piece, rolling up that whole idea of what problem do we solve, for whom do we solve it, where do we reach our customer, the challenges they've got. Get that right. If you don't do that, I think you're always on not necessarily hiding to nowhere, but you're just playing in that tactical space only, and you're leaving so much opportunity on the table.
Yeah, for me, you are. Like, if you don't have strategy first thinking, you lose. I've seen it too many times. I've been doing this 20-something years, 25 years in that sales and marketing space. If you're not strategic first, if you don't design the strategy to pick the tactics to produce the results you want, you will lose to someone who comes along who
better strategy.
has a better strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, better strategy, better understanding, they're going to win. The second piece I would be looking at is actually developing almost like an acceptance or an understanding that you can't necessarily convince a customer to buy exactly when you want. And I think this is something that gets really overlooked in the B2B space. I think that with digital marketing particularly, there's a lot of trying to retrofit what might work in a consumer context onto more complex, longer sales cycle, sort of solution selling B2B stuff. Now, oftentimes a business, particularly bigger businesses, they can't buy a product or a service or a solution unless there is a problem, and there's almost like a process that has to be worked through.
Yeah, totally.
And you cannot necessarily accelerate that purchase decision-making process from your perspective. So you might reach a prospective customer with a great offer, but it's just not the right time. And it doesn't mean they'll never buy from you, but it doesn't mean that you can just hit them with tons of follow-up emails and really aggressive buy my stuff now retargeting ads, and they'll come along and buy. Quite different to what can happen in the consumer space, at least in my experience, which is if you're Harvey Norman and you've got a $10,000 TV and you put it up for sale for $2,500 as a genuine sale. I bought a new TV last year. I'll probably go buy that $2,500 TV that should be $10,000, even if I didn't really need it. But in the B2B context, that piece is really, really key. Another thing to look at as a sort of third point is to understand that your prospective customer is going to kind of come across your business and explore and research and I guess go through that buying journey across multiple different contexts and touch points. So I think sometimes you might be able to do it where you have a very end-to-end, we're only doing like a Meta campaign, for example, or a LinkedIn ads campaign. It's all end-to-end one thing. But if I look at all the clients I work with, they will, a very common pathway would be something like this. Client exhibits at a trade show. Right? They still go to trade shows. Somebody walks past their booth, looks at the exhibit, goes and looks this company up online, finds their website, decides to connect with them on LinkedIn. They see advertising come through because, there's some targeting going on to people who follow the company page. How you'd exactly measure that and understand that is quite difficult, and I'll come to that point next as a sort of fourth point. But the key thing is knowing that it's very rare that decision-making in the B2B context occurs through one kind of particular tactic. It's about how they all combine and play together. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to kind of really make each individual tactic fire as well as possible. So it's not a license to say, hey, well, it doesn't really matter if our Google Ads is crap because we have our trade shows and we have our social media and we have our email marketing.
It needs a stack.
It all needs a stack. It all needs to work well. In the same sense that, to be a good athlete, not that I'm a great athlete, but it might be very hard if you've got a great natural talent, but your diet's rubbish.
Yeah.
Right? Like all the things combine and work together. So that piece. Fourth thing I would recommend, particularly in the B2B context, is do more of asking customers where they first heard about your business. So I think a lot of business owners lean very heavily on digital analytics, which can be very helpful for understanding things like how your website performs. Yeah. It's getting more visibility over time. But it amazes me how few business owners actually try to understand in the customer's own sense and understanding where they first came across your business, right?
Yeah.
And that is a really key thing to ask, either as an onboarding thing or in sales discovery call
or whatever.
One of my favorite
questions. How did you hear about us?
Yeah. And I think even beyond that, how did you first hear about us? So looking beyond that, because if you look at only digital analytics, it's often that last click attribution type thing. And I give you one example. I know we're kind of pressured for time, but I'll give you one example of a client I'm still working with, great customer of mine, and they had someone call them up, right? And they use HubSpot to track what the lead source are and all those kind of things. They had this guy call up and say, hey, he filled out a contact form on the website, sorry. They called him back, and it was a massive order. It was like a $2 million order for this, like a building product, basically. And according to HubSpot, that lead, he came off a Google search, right? Paid Google search. Nice. He clicked a Google ad. So they're sitting there going, this is amazing. This is like 10 years worth of Google ad budget, all paid itself off in one go. Happy days. But when the customer, the salesperson, had a discussion with this prospective customer, who became a paying customer, he actually said, hey, I was driving through the city and I saw one of your signs on the side of a building project. Nice. And I was stuck in traffic and I saw your product being used on this building site with the sign attached, and I took a note of that brand and I got to the office and I looked you up and I clicked the first thing that came up that happened to be an ad. If you only looked at that digital attribution, that whole first piece would have been missed.
And then if you weren't strategic and you didn't ask that, you then put more money into Google Ads because that's what's working.
But actually, it could be the on-site advertising.
Ditch all your signage.
That's it. Why have signage? Because we can do it all digitally.
Such a good learning.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one final point I'd round out on for B2B particularly. I mean, I'm a digital guy. I love digital marketing. That's what I focus on. But your customer doesn't just exist online. No. They exist in so many different contexts. But I think a lot of business owners, they buy the hype of kind of, you can do it all digitally only. But I'm sure you would probably agree that like we just said, your business, your customers, they exist online. They exist offline. They exist in different contexts, particularly if you're selling complex solutions, longer sales cycles. Where can you be across your customers, meet them where they're at, both online and offline, rather than zeroing in on one thing? If you've got a tactic that works and you can scale it, then do it. Why not? Like that makes perfect sense. If you've got a Google Ads campaign that's doing well and you're spending $100 a day, but you could spend 200 and get double the leads, well, you'd be crazy not to do it, right? If you've got the kind of maths that stacks up. But at the same time, that customer is probably going to trade shows. Or that customer is attending networking events, or that customer is receptive to things like physical mail, for example. They might be something that you've got like a report or some kind of industry insight thing that had existed only as a downloadable white paper behind a gate. But maybe could you package it up nicely and print it nicely and send it out to prospective customers, get them paying attention, get them opening it on their desk, and then they go and look you up online and engage to that. And I think looking beyond the digital-only aspect, particularly for B2B, that's so key. If you combine all those things together and tie it back to that strategy piece, to some extent I feel like whatever happens digitally in terms of platforms come and go, right? Things, I look back at what I first did with that, bomb marketing, article, directory stuff, that doesn't work anymore because Google came along and killed the performance of those sites. But the strategy piece still has valid applications, which is customers with a burning pain point go online to find information.
Exactly.
That piece stays consistent.
And I think that's the skill as someone who's one has the customer in mind first, right? So because you and I both know, and we both have experience with customers where it's not all about digital.
No.
We have clients doing TV, we have clients doing radio, we have clients doing newspaper, magazine,
I hear your client radio ads out and see them out and things, see that.
But I think the cool thing there is being, I always say consistency of message with frequency of reach to create relevancy. Well, how do you create relevancy? You have consistency of message and frequency of reach. your frequency of reach may need to be in all those other touch points.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And what I love about it as well is when you start to learn this sort of stuff, really from a strategic level, you start to understand it doesn't actually matter what you think.
Yeah.
It matters what the market thinks.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
You know, it matters what the buyer, where the buyer is.
Yeah.
So if the buyer is freaking reading the newspaper,
that's it. Yeah,
run newspaper, right?
Yeah.
I think you made some great takeaways there. So the first one for me was strategy first thinking.
Yeah.
We're on the same page there. Number 2 is develop. I guess that I say quality versus quantity. There's quality people and quantity people. You know, you just have to build the content for both of them. It's not your job to convince people when they should buy, right? It's that whole relevancy piece. Well, how to become relevant? I have consistency message plus frequency reach to create relevancy. I have to have quality. Quality. I've got to create content for quality people and quantity people.
Yeah.
And over time, they're going to know when they want to buy, and that comes down to your third point around the buyer's journey.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's so important. I was talking to a lady yesterday about this. You know, you need to show up and warm up people in more places.
Yeah.
You know, you're only warming up people in one area.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, yes, you're only one person, but you've got a product that, you know, it's pretty expensive and people want it, but you're not warming people up, and that buying cycle for them is a long buying cycle.
And I think that's really, really critical in the B2B context, which is where I focus. And there's some great, research and content out there around this. But one thing that I keep coming back to is I think the guy's name's Dale Harrison. I saw on LinkedIn, he's worth looking up. And he posts a lot of kind of B2B marketing and marketing measurement content. I think he posted a link to like a study. I think it was Harvard Business Review and Bain Consulting. They did this study, and I might be getting some of the details slightly wrong here, but the crux of it was that when a B2B organization, so the kinds of clients that my clients have, customers that my clients have, when they have a problem that arises, and they go out to market to seek a vendor to solve that problem, usually they have a kind of preconceived, preordained list of about 3 to 5 vendors in mind. And if you are not on that list at the outset of the process, it kind of doesn't matter if someone might Google XYZ widget just purely to sense check, are we really missing something here? But chances are, if they've already got a preconceived list of vendors, if you're not on that list from the outset, you're going to miss out on the business. And so it's all about with the strategy piece and the tactics that reinforce that. How do you get yourself on that list in the first place?
Exactly what I said to this lady yesterday. You've got to be on the shopping list. And
exactly.
To be on the shopping list, look at that buyer's journey. And then where are they? And how do you warm them up into your world?
Because you may not be able to make them buy now.
No.
I mean, if I look at some clients I work with, their clients, they can be things like government organisations who only have money to spend at a certain time of the year. And you could have the best offer ever. And it could be so compelling and everything could be dialed in perfect. If they can't spend now, doesn't matter. But does that mean they won't buy from you at the right time this year or next year?
And as another example of that, I said to her, hey, you might have people that are working at this business that love your business, that love what you're doing, but are not allowed to spend money, whether it's capex or certain time of year. Go to another business. All of a sudden, that world opens up to them, and they buy. You know, and it's I guess sometimes it's hard for business owners to think that whole part through, right? Because they all. I heard a saying recently, I really love it, I've probably said it 100 times since, but a lot of people I think, and they're actually standing in the picture frame. So they can't actually see the picture because they're in the frame. And this lady yesterday was in the frame, and I know she'll jump out of that frame, just some of the things that we talked about, but there are people out there that can't buy but want to buy. But when the time's right, they will buy.
Exactly.
Exciting times. Hey, what's your favourite history book?
Favourite history book? I always like kind of like history of business and company type books. And one of my favourite books ever is Smartest Guys in the Room, which is the Enron history. That I would recommend to anybody. I remember buying that years ago. I went on holiday over to the States. I think it was like first year of uni to go catch up with a friend who, was from high school and moved back to America. And I remember being in, I think it was San Francisco Airport. It might have even been Salt Lake City Airport, starting my journey home and going into the bookshop and going, I'm the smartest guy in the room. That sounds pretty cool. I'll buy that book, not really knowing a lot about Enron at the time. But I've read it multiple times.
Good.
Fantastic book to read. It's very engaging and kind of keeps you hooked, basically.
Mate, I'm going to read that book. Hey, Sam, I really appreciate your time. For me, I love speaking to experts. I love speaking to people that are the real deal. And as a young person, I really I respect everything that you've done to get what you're doing out there in the marketplace to help business owners. I think you play a real critical role in deciphering and actually helping business owners know where they should be spending their money.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. Easiest thing to do is just jump on my website, which is samfrost.co.nz.
Cool.
And then your contact details are on there, contact forms there. Equally, if you're on LinkedIn, connect with me on there and send a message through. But the website's the easiest option. You've got my phone number on there. It's got my email address. Got a contact form.
Perfect.
Just reach out. Yeah.
All right. So hey, we'll connect everything up in the show notes, and people can reach you. Mate, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you too. Yeah.
Hey, so once again, thank you for listening and watching on the Marketing for Business podcast. Hopefully, you've got a whole bunch of things that you can take away in your business. I know from our point of view, the reason we want to share this content is we want to give insights to business owners. So really appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you can do me one favor today, and that's to share this podcast, share the video, share the audio with someone, our business owner that you know that could really benefit from listening to what Sam has to say today. So appreciate your time. As always, have fun and talk to you really, really soon.